on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You are listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies, and today my guest is Oscar-nominated sound editor Renee Tondelli. And Renee was nominated in 2017 for Deepwater Horizon, starring Mark Wahlberg and Kurt Russell. And most recently, she's been working on Mary Poppins Returns, starring Emily Blunt and Lin-Manuel Miranda. Welcome to the show, Renee.
Hi, thank you for having me, Jan.
Well, it's exciting. This is an exciting day. Congratulations that Emily Blunt was nominated for Best Actress Golden Globe Award, Best Musical in Comedy for Mary Poppins, Lin-Manuel Miranda for Best Actor, and Mark Shyman for Best Original Score. How exciting.
I know, it was wonderful. It was great to hear that. Yeah.
How did you feel about it when you heard it today?
Oh, I was really excited. It's such a it was such a wonderful project to work on for all of us. We were all just so gifted that we were able to do that for a year. It was like my favorite year of my life in this business. So it was wonderful. And it was great to know that everybody got noticed and that they're getting recognition.
So you said it was the most exciting year of your life working on a film. So tell me a little bit about that. It was directed by Mary Poppins Returns. It was directed by Rob Marshall. And so what was it like working with Rob Marshall on this?
Rob is amazing. I've worked with 5 films. This will be my 5th film with him, and this will be the 3rd musical. Rob creates families. So his films are very, very special. Everyone that works with each other works in this very collaborative, familial way. And we don't isolate ourselves within our departments. We all sort of dip into each other's, which is really wonderful. And we do it gratefully and happily, which is kind of unusual. And it was, he's just amazing to work with. He's incredibly focused. He has impeccable timing, sense of rhythm, sense of performance. Visually, there's no one I've worked with like Rob Marshall.
He's a wonderful director, and he really does a great job with musicals. That's his forte. You've worked with a lot of great directors, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But what were some of the challenges you had with Mary Poppins Returns?
Well, one of the homages to the original Mary Poppins was the animation sequence, which was done with traditional animation, meaning hand-drawn frame by frame. So they actually had animators come out of retirement for Disney to work on this scene. And it was really wonderful because it was live action, it was 2D animation, hand-drawn animation. It was there was visual effects in it. It was really a coordination of these 3 elements. And when we first got this particular scene, which is we called it the ceramic world, Mary Poppins takes them on an adventure, and it's inside a ceramic bowl, and they actually arrive inside the bowl and in that moment we have to create this world, which is basically nothing when we got it except for green screen, the actors, a carriage, and pencil drawings. So to fill in and to make it work, this is where sound is really wonderful, because sound can fill in and make you believe that they're inside a bowl. And we did this with a couple of ways, which we recorded what they call impulse responses. So you put a microphone in the middle of a bowl and you hit it from various different ways, and then it gives you this reverberation that sounds like you're actually inside a bowl. And then you take that element and feed it through all the dialogue and the feet and everything that goes on. And so it has this wonderful sense that you're literally inside a ceramic bowl. And it went from that particular scene into the music hall, which is a very British thing. It's not necessarily something we do here very often, but a music hall in London is very bawdy and boisterous and rowdy, and the audience is very engaged with what's going on the stage, and it's filled with these animated animation characters that are wonderful. They're all elephants dressed up in saris and zebras and suits, and everybody is filling up this audience. And we did it with actors in London. We hired about 70 or 80 actors, and who could also sing. And they filled in the voices of all these animals in the music hall with a British accent, with several British accents, from the British Isles. And they also sang along, so they could sing along with Mary in the chorus, and it just filled the entire rafters. It was really fun to do that. And that was the first scene that we really went after, was the animation sequence.
Sounds really amazing. Now, how did you come up with the idea of how you would make it sound like it was in a ceramic bowl? I mean, what kind of process was that?
Just fiddling, you start hitting a bowl and going, oh, that's how it sounds. Well, what if we hit it with a hammer? What if we hit it with another piece of ceramic? What if we hit it with a drum mallet? What if we hit it with a shoe? And you just start to play around with all these different sounds, and you realize that, okay, that's how it makes, because that's how it becomes a ceramic bowl. So, and we had there's a horse in it that becomes the rhythmic track almost for the song that Mary's singing. And she's in a carriage, and the horse is trotting along, and we actually used coconuts on a porcelain sink to make it sound like it actually was this horse in a porcelain bowl, which was a little bit of a challenge sometimes, because later on in the scene during the nightmare, there becomes a very aggressive and scary scene where there's a horse being chased. There's a chase that occurs, and you needed to have it be powerful and strong, but also still in a ceramic bowl. So it was an interesting challenge to create this combination, which my fellow sound supervisor and sound designer Eugene Garrity did an amazing job on that.
How did you decide to become a sound editor? I mean, it's not like a career path that you when you're a kid, you go, you know what? I think I love the different sounds in movies, and I think I'll become a sound editor.
It is a good question. It's a really good question. When my first job actually was in radio, oddly enough. I walked down to our local station when I was 17, and they had these, they called them brokerage hours. So if you were, say, the Polish, you could buy an hour on this station, and it was the Polish hour or the Lithuanian hour or the Irish hour. And those guys were always wonderful. They always came in drunk and crazy, and I'd have to force them into the studio. But I ended up I walked in there, and he said, "Can you engineer?" And I said, "Sure." I didn't even know what that meant. And he said, "Good, because this guy just quit." So I literally started that day not knowing anything that I wanted to do, know how to do my job. But part of the process in it, which was so fun, is that you ended up having, like, for instance, the Polish hour. They speak all in Polish, but I had all these, one of my jobs was to do all the live sound effects. So I had a big table with all of these, doorbells and bells and feet and shoes and things that I had to create live during their Polish hour. And of course, I didn't understand what they were saying, but he would look at me and glare at me, and I would somehow know that was a doorbell. And then so I started to realize, wow, this is really fun to create this world, which is what radio is, right? It's the way of telling a story through sound. And from that point, I went to ABC, and I became the first female engineer that they had, which was, at a time, it was interesting to be that, because it was traditionally a male job. But while I was there, I really always wanted to go through film school. So I went to film school while I was working at ABC. And somehow it just ended up, because I really wanted to be a director, oddly enough. And then I ended up becoming really good at what I was doing. And then I just started to fall in love with sound, and I ended up doing that when I came out here.
That's amazing. And you have worked with some amazing directors. You've worked with Quentin Tarantino, James L. Brooks, Nancy Meyers, David O. Russell, Peter Berg, Curtis Hanson, Jay Roach, John Singleton. I mean, it sounds like you hit the ground running. Back to Hollywood.
Well, it's a wonderful thing, because I remember, and I'd love to say this because I like to inspire everyone. When I decided I was going to Hollywood, everybody said to me, do you know how hard it is to get a job out there? I mean, you got to be crazy. And I looked at them and I said, well, somebody has to do it. Why not me? And I think that a lot of what we want to do, we don't necessarily do because we're thinking it's, especially for women, we always think that we have to be uber qualified to do something, that a man is much more willing to go, sure, I can do that, and not know what they're doing, but just figure it out quickly as they go. But for women, I think we have a tendency to sit back and wait till we're ready. And, you just never are. And there's nothing like any film school I went to, anything that I worked in radio, because I did a lot of the production in radio, and I would create these hour-long programs, which were wonderful, that created a whole story and sound. And I also worked in the newsroom. So I know that there was all of that elements, but once I came out to do a real film, it was completely new. Everything I had to learn fresh, pretty much. And actually, frankly, that same thing happens on every film. Every single film that you start, even though it's a musical or even though it's from the same director, it's a completely different film. And you sit there and look at it and say, what am I going to say? What is this film going to say? What do I need to do that's different than anything I've done so far? And how can I bring this story to life? And it's a wonderful process to go through that. And I think I'd love to encourage more people to do that, because it really is just jumping in it and doing it.
And did you ever feel like you were just in over your head?
Of course. Did I let anyone know? No.
So you're a good actress too.
My first job on the stage, I remember I said I was working on War of the Roses, and I had just started. I'd been in the film out here for maybe 6 months, 8 months. And I said, hey, I want to learn how to do the ADR. I'd love to do that, work that out. And the supervisor looked at me like I was crazy, like, yeah, sure. Well, one day he called me and he said, do you still want to do that? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, get down here with a pad of paper. And I ran down with my little pad of paper, and he said to me, okay, know when to call sync, even if you don't know it, fake it. Never let them know that you don't know. I was like, okay, fake sync, I got that. He said, and never fraternize with the actors. And I went, okay, never fraternize with the actors. And he said, now get out of here. You got Michael Douglas in 15 minutes. And that was my first job. And I walked down the stage, and there was Danny DeVito and James L. Brooks and Michael Douglas. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And I just pretended I knew what I could do. It's like Mark Twain says, you are who you think you are. So and it was really funny, because it got, I actually said to Michael Douglas, well, I don't think that one really worked. And he looked at me and said, I'm the best in the business. And Danny DeVito said, she says you're not, do it again. And
Sorry.
So yeah, it's definitely winging it when you first do it. And even every film I go on to, believe me, every single film I'm like, oh, can I do this? I mean, well, how am I going to do this? And, you kind of sit down to a film. When you get a film, it's really just the dialogue and just effects and things that the picture department put in. But you have to really create this world, especially in Mary Poppins, when you've got 12 brand new songs, and Rob is really careful about not wanting to just cue the audience and say, here comes the song. And so everybody kind of cringes in musicals. So it's a very organic process that he goes through, and he uses every single department to its highest performance. And we have these, you have to bring the song in a very graceful way and sort of hug it and let the audience believe that it actually happened, all of it in that one scene at that moment. And it's involved with using pre-records that they do in a studio, live vocals that they do on the set, a bit of ADR, which is, we record things afterwards, little bits and pieces that you want to change. And then you melt all those together so that it feels like it's a very organic process. And each one is very different. Each song was very different.
Absolutely fascinating. If you are just tuning in, you're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies. And my guest today is Oscar-nominated sound editor Renee Tondelli, and we're talking about the brand new, highly anticipated Disney film, Mary Poppins Returns. When you do a movie, does the director give you notes in advance on what sounds he wants? I mean, how do you decide what you need for a movie when you're making it?
That's a good question. On this particular, because I've worked with Rob so many times, I do know his tastes very well. Although I always like to stretch them, because I think a director, when he first comes into, they're sort of terrified when they sit down to their first cut and go, okay, what do I have? But he's not that guy. He sits down and he knows every single take. He knows he goes through all of the material so that it's really familiar to him. And what he does is he will pick the best performances of everything. And we do a process. And on this particular film, we talked about Mary Poppins. And to me, it was magical realism. It wasn't fantasy. She happens to be this amazing woman who's magical. So everything had to be dipped in realism. So that was pretty much the way we approached this film. And what I often do with every director, and especially with Rob, is that we sit down and come up and we'll create elements for this scene, like I spoke about earlier with the animation scene. And I'll say, okay, this is what we think the horse would be, and this is how the people would be, and this is the birds and the entire backgrounds, and create these elements for him and give them to him, and he puts them into their editing process, which he does with Wyatt Smith, who's our Uber picture editor, and they sit there and they kind of taste the sounds, like, oh, that's too much that, I don't like the squeak in that, can you get rid of this? Oh, how about if we did more of that? And so the process is a very fluid, continual process that by the time we actually get to the mix stage, he knows exactly what he has. There's no surprises. It's all been fleshed out. And that point, which is a wonderful way to go, because it's this way he's very confident about it, and he's able to do further pruning, so to speak. I'd love a little more of that, or can you take that away? And that's the process, working with Rob.
And obviously it's different with each director. Can you talk a little bit about you worked with Quentin Tarantino on Django Unchained and Grindhouse. Talk a little bit about, because he's such a fascinating director.
He is. I love Quentin. He is. Yeah, he's fantastic. I remember I'm from a family of 11, and I met him and I said, oh, Quentin, you are my dream as a child. I always wanted to be the only child, because he's an only child. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, it's pretty good. But as a director, he's amazing. He knows everything so well. Like, he spends a lot of time in the edit room. The same process happens on that, where you feed him material. He is more hands-off. He works a lot with Wiley Stateman, who is, an Uber sound designer, and they've worked for years. And so there's a lot of processes that go on between them in the early stages and during the process. But when he comes, he's very specific about certain things. He hates any additional dialogue. It doesn't matter how bad the sound is, and we work really, really hard to clean up all the dialogue so that there is nothing that gets replaced. It's all original dialogue. His songs, the way he does it, and he doesn't like to edit the music, so he'll pick a song and it's often played from beginning to end, and he uses that when he's actually filming so that the song actually works in a very organic way. I mean, he's amazing. He once said something about the writing process, and he said that he writes it 3 times. Once when he writes the film, once when he shoots the film, and then once when he edits it. And that's another process that he spends time with. It was great to work with him.
Yeah, that's why he does so few films. He puts so much into each one of them.
The same with Rob. They just give heart and soul. And Rob will spend 3 years on a film, and he will not finish. He will not even think about doing another one until this baby is done and delivered. It's amazing. They really do. They're auteurs. They have a really wonderful sense of things, which is great to work with people like that. It's amazing because they have it's just amazing.
Yeah, you can imagine. We have time for one more question. Tell me a little bit about working on Deepwater Horizon. What were some of the obstacles on that, since you were nominated for an Oscar and a BAFTA award and many awards for that particular film? So tell me about some of the challenges of doing that film.
Everything was a challenge on that film.
Okay, so we don't have enough time, is what you're telling me today.
Exactly. Let me just begin. First of all, there was no working equipment. None. It was shot on a parking lot in Louisiana, in the old Six Flags parking lot. They built sets there. They also had sets in an old abandoned big store, one of those giant stores. So we built all of the interiors. They built all the interior sets of the rooms that were within the rig. So everything had to be created, every single thing. The dialogue was a mess. And it's the antithesis of Mary Poppins. Like in Mary Poppins, we fretted over every single breath, vowel, consonant. This one was like, yeah, we don't care. It sounds great. We ended up almost making it sound worse because it was supposed to feel, we wanted it to feel very sort of almost documentary-like, so that they literally were on a rig. And it was, like when a helicopter lands and everyone's talking, we just left that as it was. And it was like, okay, what's important? What words do you want to hear? And we just looped those words and put them in so that you could kind of hear what's going on. It was completely different. It was a real challenge, that film.
Fascinating. Renee, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. I really appreciate you coming on. You have been listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies, and my guest today has been Oscar-nominated sound editor Renee Tondelli.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
Tired of looking at your worn wood floors? Mr. Sandless can bring them back to life again. That's right. It's Mr. Sandless, the no sanding solution to beautiful wood floors. Mr. Sandless is clean, efficient, contains no harmful chemicals, and is certified green. Mr. Sandless refinishes all hardwoods, softwoods, engineered flooring, and laminates. Most jobs are completed in one day with no cleanup required ever, with virtually no odor, and is safe for pets and kids. No need to move out or even leave the house. Mr. Sandless is the company that invented Sandless Refinishing and is the largest floor refinishing company in the world. Over 120,000 happy customers, guaranteed adhesion, guaranteed satisfaction, and a 5-year warranty. Call Mr. Sandless today at 831-747-7476. That's 747-7476. Or MrSandless.com. That's MrSandless.com.